We get our information about the flood in two different ways. The first is old texts. I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm talking about the texts the Bible copied from. There are many texts in many languages, such as Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, etc. Museums around the world have these tablets and have translated the texts themselves, such as Penn Museum.
And this is one such tablet that had been broken into pieces. He actually did find more fragments of it, and in 1872 presented it at a scholarly meeting, and in 1874 published it as the 11th tablet of the Izdubar legend, and we still call it Gilgamesh 11. So he was really a pioneer, and you can imagine what a tremendous furor this caused, because you have an entire Victorian culture centered around the Bible and the Old Testament, and suddenly you have these weird and wonderful cuneiform tablets which look like nothing on earth, written by people who are mentioned in the Bible, the Assyrians, right? And telling us a tale, a narrative that to all intents and purposes also occurs in the Old Testament. So that really put Assyriology on the map.
First, let's look at why the flood happened from the ancient texts. There is an important tablet in the British Museum that gives a huge backstory to the Anunnaki, the alien race called gods that created Homo sapiens, but I'll show other translations in a minute.
This is just a late piece of Atrahasis, just to make the point that Atrahasis actually has a version from about 1600 or so, and versions that go all the way down through to about 650 or so in Ashurbanipal's library. And one of the interesting things is the flood story occurs in Atrahasis and it occurs in Gilgamesh, and the same people have these two tales in their heads, but they don't see them as mutually exclusive. They're just different parts of the same tradition.
I'll come back to the Atrahasis tablets soon, but let's look at another tablet.
So this is not quite the start of the Sumerian flood story, though it is the start of this tablet. You can see this is the top edge here. And it starts off, the gods created humanity. Very nice. And the animals were multiplying below altogether. They made livestock and quadrupeds as fitting things in the steppe. In the high steppe, they somethinged joyous plants everywhere. There's a missing verb. At that time, the canal was not dug. This is very common in...
Here's a clear description of the Anunnaki creating Homo sapiens. The tablet has been called Enki and Nimna, and you can find this whole translation online. My mother, the creature you planned will really come into existence. Impose on him the work of carrying baskets. You should knead clay from the top of the Abzu. The birth goddesses will nip off the clay and you shall bring the form into existence. Let Ninma act as your assistant, and let Ninima, Kuziana, Ninmata, Ninbarag, Ninmug, and Ninguna stand by as you give birth. My mother, after you have decreed his fate, let Ninma impose on him the work of carrying baskets. It goes on to say Enki brought joy to their heart. He set a feast for his mother Nama and for Ninma. All the princely birth goddesses ate delicate reed and bread. An Enlil and the Lord Nudimud roasted holy kids. All the senior gods praised him. O Lord of wide understanding, who is as wise as you? Enki, the great Lord, who can equal your actions. Like a corporeal father, you are the one who has the me of deciding destinies. In fact, you are the me. Enki and Ninma drank beer. Their hearts became elated. And then Ninma said to Enki, man's body can be either good or bad, and whether I make a fate good or bad depends on my will. Enki answered Ninma, I will counterbalance whatever fate, good or bad, you happen to decide. Ninma took clay from the top of the Abzu in her hand, and she fashioned from it first a man who could not bend his outstretched weak hands. Enki looked at the man who could not bend his outstretched weak hands and decreed his fate. He appointed him as a servant of the king. There is more, but we even have a more defined version. Let's listen to the tablets in the Columbia University translation by George Moorhan.
The account of the Enki leadership tablet. Enki reveals a secret to the leadership's lack of conviction. A species comparable to the Anunnaki roams free in the Abzu. Through the combination of its energy with that of the Anunnaki, it may be upgraded to an intelligent rudimentary worker. Enlil exclaimed, Creation belongs to the father of all beginnings. Ninma said, We will only offer our resemblance to a live being. Enki, Ninma, and Ningishzida, Enki's son, undertake experiments. After several failures, Adam achieves perfection. Ninmar exclaims jubilantly, "My hands have triumphed." As hybrids, humans are unable to reproduce. Ningishzida adds two important branches to their life tree. Ninki, the spouse of Enki, helps in the creation of Tiamat, a female earthling.
This tablet goes a lot more in detail. Let me know if you'd like me to do a whole video on the creation of Homo sapiens. After the Homo sapiens started to multiply, Enki took some of them to Mesopotamia to use as slaves. Enki also had his own palace there, as agreed by Penn Museum.
They create and assign the first cities to gods, and this is also in the Penn, the Sumerian flood tablet. And on the reverse, when we pick up again, among those cities, Eridu, which is the city of the god Enki Ea, the god of wisdom and magic, they established as the leader, probably. When you see words in italics in my translations, it means that we're not quite certain that that's what was there, either because we don't understand the word or because there's a break, maybe.
Aerial scans show Enki's temple complex underground, yes, buried by the flood. Now we can see why they needed to create Homo sapiens. It's in the Atrahasis tablet.
The very first words are, when the gods like man. That's how it was known in antiquity, by the first words. When the gods like man. Did the work, bore the loads. The gods' load was too great. They worked too hard, the trouble too much. The great Anunnaki, it's a collective term for the higher gods, made the Igigi, which is a collective term for the lower gods, carry the workload sevenfold.
I've shown in my documentary called The Lost Book of Our True History that the Igigi were the younger gods, the sons of the older gods. They volunteered to come to Earth. They thought they would be heroes saving their planet, but they didn't know they would have to work in mines.
But to cut a long story short, the gods don't like this. They don't like the sweat and the toil, and you can't blame them really, right? And so they rebel, and there's a god called Allah.
This was just 7 minutes of the full 1 hour video. To watch the full 1 hour documentary, visit ourtruehistory.co.uk and search Flood. There's over 1,000 other documentaries there that you might also like. Our True History.